joined.
Hey, Dr. Butler. Okay, we're gonna do our names so you know who's all in this group. Savannah Heckman.
Macy Spicer.
Brittany Ray.
Alexa Quinones.
Gabriela Romero.
Alright.
And we're seeing White Group 1.
Episode 1, guys.
Key understandings. Was there anything that really stuck out to you guys that you wrote down, or what is she doing?
I don't know. Okay.
I wrote down that we all carry notions and stories about what whiteness means, and I thought that was pretty powerful. Like, even if we think we don't, we do.
Mm-hmm.
I know they talked a lot about like the media too being a part of it, and just hearing like both sides of like what racism looks like in the media.
I liked how the guy, I don't have his name written down, but the one he always calls at the end of each episode, he said when whiteness is brought up, blackness is still how the issue is framed, which I thought was really interesting. Like, it's not talking about whiteness as an issue, it's like how blackness reflects it.
What was the second part?
Blackness is still how the issue is framed.
I mostly wrote like quotes from this episode. So like one of them was by Buin, and he just said that you can have racism without individual racists because systems and structures have been set up in a way that they just run this way on their own at this point.
Yeah, I have power and systems play a huge part in racism. Racism can still exist without individual racists, which is basically
That's
what you
exactly
said.
what I wrote too.
Okay, so we all agree on that.
Yeah, are there any like really big key understandings? I have the media, I have the violences happening all around the world, because they gave like those 3 examples, or 4 examples? Yeah, 4 examples. And I put white people are not great at seeing whiteness.
I also wrote that.
These 3 kind of go together, like what you said about systems and how people who don't have racist attitudes can still play a part in systems of oppression.
Right. I don't know, I think it was hard because a lot of them I have as like questions that he had said, but like that get answered in later episodes, so I don't think I want to put those.
And this was like a really introductory episode.
Yeah.
So, key vocabulary, anyone have anything? I have race relations, structural racism, prejudice, and bigotry. How do you say?
That I had race relations and structural racism, and I had really similar definitions, so.
I feel like most people know what prejudice is. So I don't know if we want to include that in the key vocabulary, but we can.
I
have
feel like
it.
I would.
I think it's because
Okay.
it does get
It's
brought
better
up
to have
in like
it.
every episode,
Yeah,
I feel like, so.
true. Okay.
So should we write an overview?
Yeah.
Okay. This episode is an introduction to what the podcast is going to be about. They talked about what whiteness means. One main message of the episode was how we can switch from looking at racism like a disease to understanding it through the systems that cause or support racism.
Yeah.
See,
I
I think
feel like we should add too.
so. That sentence and mine, I said when I talked about race relations, I said racism is a disease, and we're trying to figure out who has it. But I don't know if I put that before they were like, but that's not how should we look at it. Should have taken better notes, but I do like that. I think I do agree. I think we could add more.
Definitely need to add to the overview though. So like,
I think also something we could put was talking about how something with the idea, because they kept bringing it back to like you can't have whiteness without putting down like blackness. Like it's kind of like the elephant in the room. Like they always, when you talk about whiteness, it's still.
Yeah, and I feel like we should also talk about how like white people, they don't see, like they're blinded kind of, you know what I mean? Like they're blinded from like I guess I don't know. Let me see that, but I said it focuses more on people of color, and white people are looked at as invisible So like I feel like something along those lines.
I had that too, like white people are invisible, and then any person of color is like the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
They like. So I don't know how we could frame that into
Yeah.
an overview unless we just put exactly that.
Yeah.
How like
Because I feel like that's one of the main concepts that they really like
yeah.
were focusing on.
How yes, because white people being as invisible, the people of color being the elephant in the room. Now we're like this whole series is focusing on seeing white, like seeing whiteness for what it is, not just like I don't know,
Mm-hmm.
being in the background kind of. I guess
Yeah.
that's what I would say.
That's all.
I don't know.
Alright. Is that all good?
Looks wonderful, Savannah.
Perfect.
Okay, relation to social studies. I had, as a white educator, this episode's very beneficial for me to understand how the power of my students can either be a good thing or a bad thing, like how my power over them. And I need to understand how like the school system can support racism so that I can prevent falling into that system. What else? He even said we need to see if we can get a little better at seeing the water. I wrote that down because I thought that was really good. And it also made me think of like the second module on the master narrative and how there's like mirrors and windows. Like we need to be aware of the master narrative on racism and white people so we can avoid that in general.
I like how you reflected it to the modules, but I think the first two sentences are kind of like weirdly worded.
Yeah.
I need to make sure that I understand how the
Yeah,
school
I know.
system can support racism. I don't think they're necessarily like
Or like in ways that it does unintentionally. Like you know how the episode talked about like systems, how they support it without realizing like
Right.
that kind of thing.
I think a better way of wording that would be like, I need to make like a conscious effort of like breaking down systemic or what was it called, structural racism in schools or like in education as a white educator. I think you could even do that with the first sentence. As a white educator, it is very important for us to understand the structural racism in education and to break down that system.
That sounds really good, yeah.
Is there anything else that you guys have for relationship to social studies education?
Mm-mm.
No.
I related it to the master narrative too.
Yeah.
So
In the mirrors and windows. I think that's a good one.
Okay, reflections. Oh, I have like, although I claim that like I'm not a racist, it said like there are systems of oppressions that people support that they might not realize. So like even though I claim I'm not racist, do I support those systems in ways? And so I think that was like really good to like reflect on. And if I see my own whiteness, and I mentioned that I come from a small town, so like I wasn't exposed to a lot of diversity, so that might like also affect what whiteness means to me. I know that obviously doesn't,
I know. So should we
to
have that in our
everyone?
should we have that in our group
but
notes? Do you think?
I can have like in the reflections, we can have like our group ones, and then I'll put like Savannah mentioned.
Oh yeah,
know what I'm
we can
saying?
put that.
Yeah, you guys can think about your reflections over that, and like I can add them too.
If mine relates to yours, like I went to pretty much all white school, so. Not a lot of diversity as I like,
Do you want me
When I
to
was
include
younger.
that then?
you can, if you want, cause like that's.
Like we relate to that on that level.
I would say, for me,
half of my family is Hispanic and Black,
Mhm.
and my high school was probably 80% white, but we did have a good portion of like Hispanic and Black kids. So I was exposed to it growing up. So like I don't really think like this was really like enlightening kind of, if that's the
Still.
right word.
Mhm.
Yeah, because like finding out all this stuff, like I would never even like think about these things,
Right.
just because like it's in my family and I saw it at school.
Yeah, I feel like kind of because like I went to a predominantly white school, but like obviously like I'm colored, so like just the difference between that. So like I guess it was eye opening too for me, but like because obviously like going to school with a whole bunch of like white people, I become whitewashed. That's like kind of what it is, and like
Right.
my boyfriend, he's African American, you know, so like he just seeing him because he's like whitewashed too, and I put something like that just like they kind of have like a stereotype, you know what I mean? Like they have to act a certain way because they're that color, and like people expect that of them. So I kind of like put that because like same with me, like I'm expected to like I don't know like make Mexican food or like do that type of stuff, but it's
Right.
like I really don't know how to do that because I am whitewashed, you know.
Yeah.
But like my family isn't. It's just me because I went to school like in
Yeah.
that community, and like the people I surround myself with are predominantly white. So.
One of like my best friends from high school, well, like even growing up in like elementary school, was adopted into like a white family after like being in the foster care system with them, and that was something she had always said, like, I feel whitewashed like in this, but she said especially she was like the only Black girl in our entire class, and she was like, I have to be so careful. Like her parents would tell her this, which like looking back is kind of crazy. They were like, if you're at an event, you are going to be the first person people point out. Like if they were like, oh well, who was here? Oh, like the Black girl was there. Like because you look different than everyone, which is like kind of jarring. Like I couldn't imagine hearing that from my parents, but she was like, yeah, she was like, no matter what, like being in this area, like you look different. Like it's just not that you're like I like to think of my community as not like ostracizing her, but like looking different than everyone. You have and that I think that's like a structural racist like point of view, being like, oh well, just looking different than everyone. So she did try to like whitewash herself, and her parents did too, to like just kind of get rid of that part of her, which
kind of sounds bad.
it does, right?
Okay, do you guys want to put in the reflections what you guys said? Because I like what you guys said, but I don't want to word it differently. So I feel like those reflections are good since we have like similar experiences. I also deleted something that I talked about just because it's like more personal, but like at my school, they're like, I know maybe, I don't know, 2 Black kids, literally, and like the one ended up going to juvie because he harassed a girl and like his job, and then the other one broke into someone's house. So it's like I had to think about, does my experience like already make me have preconceived conceptions? I would say I don't, but like ultimately, like at the end of the day, do they? So like that was something that I reflected on even. But like I had Black family, so then like you know all those things that come together, and you're like, wait, okay, what are these like making me? How do they make me think about it? And so I don't know. That was interesting to do too.
Do we want to start episode 2 while they finish up their? Just keep going.
Oh, did we do the overview? Yeah, we did, right?
Yeah, that's what we were just working on.
Okay.
So key understandings. I said the 3 types of
Races.
yes, the 3
Yeah,
races.
just because they said it was.
Oh,
Yeah,
I had
that.
never
heard of
that
Me neither.
Me neither.
and I was really shocked by hearing that.
I even put not. I put ... not a biological fact because I was like,
Yeah,
The only thing
what?
that
I'm
made me
pretty sure I wrote down.
Yes.
I've literally never heard of that, but I did write down what they were called.
the only thing it
Me
made me
too.
think of was I went to the Ark Encounter in Kentucky, which is like they built Noah's Ark like according to like the biblical things, and they talked about how like Noah's 3 sons had like 3 different wives, and like one was white, one like looked like she was from Africa, and one looked like Asian, and they said like that is kind of, which I like never had heard of before, like my whole life going to church, and that's the only thing I had thought of before, and I was like, this is weird. Like I was like, this is. I was like, I don't know, but yeah,
that's really interesting.
I liked how they this episode I really liked how it talked about the biology of a lot of it.
Me too.
How
Like,
it
where did we even
racism.
get race from?
Yes.
Like that was
yes.
interesting.
Mm-hmm.
People evolving in Africa, like literally everyone, and like the genes when they said 99.9% genetically the same.
Yes.
That's
I wrote that down.
crazy. I wrote that.
To that part, I said that we are all 99.9% genetically the same, regardless of race, and there is more diversity in a group of penguins than there are across like races of people, which was like crazy to me, because penguins like literally all look exactly the
No,
same.
yeah, that is crazy.
And then they said like, does it make race real? Not scientifically, but it is politically, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, like how we constructed it,
Right.
and how it just came because Westerns called themselves white.
Yep. And I liked how I also talked about the Greeks. They didn't see race,
Yeah.
but they saw you as like lighter and darker. So like they still weren't being like colorblind. They were like,
Yeah,
I
it was just like literally based on where you live geographically,
Right.
and I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I wrote about the ancient Greeks that I said they thought that their culture was the best, and they saw lesser humans in every direction.
right. Yeah. It wasn't because they were like from Africa. Like they, yeah.
If you weren't Greek, you weren't good, basically, is what they were implying.
I talked about how the like slavery, how like all colors were enslaved. I thought that was really
Because
interesting.
the Vikings enslaved all kinds of people, like literally their own people, but then also just like anyone who could work, they were like enslaving you.
Yeah.
So
I wrote about Prince Henry, the navigator.
mhm.
I'm like trying to read my notes and like make sense of them
I know,
again.
me too.
So-
feels like so long ago.
I know.
I know.
Yeah, he was the first to enslave only black people and people from Portugal.
Wait, what name did you say?
Prince Henry the Navigator.
Okay. I have Zerara.
He
Is that
wrote
his name?
about.
Yes.
He wrote the biography about
Okay.
Prince Henry, the navigator.
So, what I have here, can everyone see that?
Mm-hmm.
Is that, does that explain it well? I can't remember, so I'm like,
I would say Zerara. Do you have this from the transcript, the spelling?
Yeah.
Okay. Glorified Prince Henry the Navigators.
Historic. I have it. Glorified Prince Henry's historic voyage a decade before, when he sailed to sub-Saharan Africa to see the captives directly.
yeah, if you
Yeah.
guys have important things that we feel, we can add them too.
And he said he went to do this because he thought he was helping them.
Yeah, and that's what these people need our help, and that's why slavery is so important.
And he described the captives as living like beasts with no understanding of good, but only how to live in bestial sloth. That's rude.
Yeah, I wrote about that too. Like, I had to write this down because I was like, it literally made my jaw drop. That they said by the 1500s, other ideologies expressed similar ideas about African people being the beast. I was literally jaw dropped at that.
Right.
It's like how. Insane.
Like they started describing them
Insane.
using the word beast, and then
Yeah, I wrote 3 races keeps getting mentioned, but I've never heard of this concept.
Mm-hmm.
race is real in the way that society has been structured.
I wrote that exact quote.
So then science is like organized around that concept. I thought that was interesting. Like, I don't know, we just said that's what it is, and then science supports it.
Yeah.
Like,
I also quoted ignorance caused exploitation. I don't know who said that though.
exploitation, right?
Oh, that was the guy that he always calls at the end.
Oh, okay.
I
Yes.
really like that guy.
I do
He
too.
always
I love
says
when,
like great things.
You always
Isn't
hear
he,
like it
like,
ring.
Ch-
Yeah, and then you're like,
Chinjara.
I'm like, get
Chinjari?
ready.
Yeah.
It's about to be.
I wrote his name, but I
yeah.
don't want to.
It's in the transcript. you
Yeah,
can
I
look it
wrote
up.
it down because I wanted to like be like, this was the good guy. I like that guy a lot.
I have something about it's not about misunderstanding. Like basically when people are like, or like not having an understanding. Like when people say, "Oh, they just didn't understand." Like it's not about that because that's not what racism was. like racism was just this made up idea. Like you didn't have to understand anything to know that was, wrong.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right.
So that kind of goes along with like the ignorance caused whatever.
Exploitation, yeah, right.
Yeah.
I have this huge quote written down. So you guys say something and I'll like summarize this huge.
Go for it right now.
Well, do you want me to just read the whole thing?
Yeah, just
Yeah.
read it.
It's like 5 lines.
Well, we can come up with a key concept from it.
Okay, cool. Okay, this is all quoted. I did not make any of this up. So you know it was only more in the last few hundred years that at the same time that you had the Enlightenment and the people to some degree having higher standards for how human beings treated each other, that then it seems that it became more necessary to have a justification to dehumanize folks before you try justifying to enslave them.
So basically, they just tried to make up reasons why it was okay to like exploit
Yeah.
those people.
Mm-hmm.
For labor, yeah.
Yeah. I think that's really good on the key understandings. I think we all
That was
really took
really
away the main things. So vocab, I have anthropology, because I low-key did not know what that meant.
I know it's a store.
I know. An expensive
I've
store.
never actually been there.
I haven't either.
It sounds expensive.
I have the melanin too, but I know what that meant, but like I was like maybe somebody
They
else
talk
would.
about it a lot,
So
which I think is important.
I hadn't heard about that. Like maybe I'm like out of the loop, but I didn't even know what that was until like a year ago.
yeah,
Mhm.
I was gonna say I don't think a lot of people would.
Yeah, but I wrote it down too.
Okay, vocab. Anyone write down any vocab that they were like?
He mentioned imperialism, so I wrote that down.
Okay.
But that was the only like other thing, because I just like put for vocab. I did like the Caucasoid, the Mongoloid, like that
Yeah.
stuff.
Should
Oh, like
put
the
those in
races?
there?
Yeah.
Or if we put them in, are we just giving into that idea that they're
Well,
actual
no, I think-
races, or is it like
I think having it in the key concept is fine. I don't think we have to define
Yeah.
them because
Okay.
we said that they were
Like
like
the
the three
three
races.
Okay.
There's really no way to like
Yeah.
define
kinda
them.
agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else have the vocab that they were like
Mm.
that stuck out to me? So overview, I literally have like 2 sentences. um,
I'm gonna plug in the definition of imperialism.
okay, so it explored how every group believed themselves to be superior. Should I put like based on location since we like really hit that like based on location?
Yeah.
I feel like because somebody else said that there were people who were living a certain way, they needed quote unquote help.
Because it was different than ours.
I'm not really sure how to put that into
I
like
know. So like because because they felt they were superior, they created reasons for having for having slaves and calling those people inferior.
think-
But like if slavery was like all people.
I think what I would say is because they believe themselves superior, anyone who lived different than them, or like lived differently than them, or even looked differently than them, was automatically considered inferior.
which like gave excuse to
Yeah. Wait.
like enslave and
Enslaving them, yeah.
To have justification to dehumanize.
Yep.
Before enslaving them.
Very. Enslaving.
No, honestly, it's so
Oh, that's
impressive
so
how
funny.
you're typing this as
Think
you're
I'm, like-
saying it, because I can't.
If this whole teaching thing doesn't work out, you could be like a court reporter.
that's a whole different keyboard.
Okay, so-
It is.
Is it really?
yeah, it's like 4 keys or whatever, and then I don't know how
It's like
exactly
short.
it works.
It's like shorthand,
Yeah.
and then you like translate it later.
Oh wow, I had no idea. You
So,
can
like-
answer now.
So like as this went on, this idea of race just came to be.
As it was like, I think it was like justified, like The
As
way-
slavery went on, because it said slavery came first.
Mhm.
So as slavery went on,
These racist ideas were just more instilled or more justified or set up.
became instilled creating like even the idea of race. Because it's like, how did we get race? That's how we got it.
Yeah. Race and racism. Because I feel like you can't have
Racist ideas.
That wait in the first episode that goes back.
in the last episode they even mentioned that you can't have
You can't have racism without individual races.
boom.
Jump it back.
Run it back.
Shout out episode 1.
I feel like at the beginning also, so this episode is about how race came to be and what it actually is, exploring how every group, blah, blah, blah. Before it explored, I feel like we need to mention something about how, like, we're all biologically, like, racism even, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know how to word that, but I think that was really important.
I would say although because in the second one it's like it explored how every group believed themselves to be superior based on location and where they came from, comma, even though we are 99.9% genetically the same.
Can I include that, like, here before it goes into that? So, like, people evolved in Africa or from it?
I don't think I would put a statistic in an overview. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
or being explored how every group believed
But I
themselves
feel like
to be
there's has to
superior.
be something in the overview where it's like,
Okay, here, I got it.
we're not actually,
Explored how every group
Buttercook.
believed themselves to be superior based on location and where they came from, although whatever it's spelled on, science has
I see what
disproven
you're doing.
this
Okay.
by showing we are nearly genetically identical. Regardless of quote unquote race. The flame's coming off my keyboard right now. Just kidding. Kidding. Joke.
It's beautiful.
I think that's a pretty good
Okay.
overview.
Yeah. Relationship to social studies education. I just have, like, knowing that we're closely related, like, it's all just biological, like, it can help us to, like, treat everyone the same. Yeah, I'm gonna have relationship to social studies education, like, as teachers in the classroom.
I think it is important to tell our students this fact that like race was like made up, like, but I think it is really important that we still teach how it's like it's very political because like your whole life, like even stuff when we fill out like our identity wheels, it asks you your race
Yeah.
and your so like we can't tell students like, oh, it's made up so don't worry about it because like they're like unfortunately like it is needed in our society kind of.
Yeah.
It's been,
Right.
it's evolved as we have, so everyone is just, like, used to it now.
Because I even wrote, I was like, does it make race real? Not scientifically, but it is politically because we
Yeah.
constructed it that way.
Yes, definitely.
So I think we still do need to teach about it. Like, of course, saying we are all alike, but according to like our society, this is what you are. Because later in episodes they talk about like how colorblindness is bad, being like,
Yeah.
oh, I don't see race,
Yeah,
because then you
oh,
don't
I
see racism.
race. Yeah.
We still need to,
Foreshadowing.
unfortunately, we have to teach it.
Oh,
Sneak
here
peek
you
for
go.
you. Oh, no, we're good.
Okay.
No, we're almost there.
Okay, so,
On episode 3.
We're halfway. We're
oh
cooking
my
along.
gosh. So did what I said, I feel like there's other ways. I'm so bad at getting my thoughts.
That we are more like.
No, literally, girls.
More like. Than we may realize.
Okay, I feel like we need more to, like, relationship. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Another relationship could be.
Oh my gosh.
Could we, I don't know if the identity wheels could go with this.
I know. I'm trying to think of like the other modules we've done. So we talked about like master narrative. We've talked a lot about like sourcing so far. We've talked about what was right before that? In between those, I don't remember.
I am gonna put the wheels just because I think it's a good example.
I think that does relate to social education. We had to do a
Because-
whole LEA on that.
Well,
Put it in there.
we just
That's
talked
true.
about how racism is still real, like politically. So I feel like that kind of goes along with that.
And we even did identity wheels in like classes that like weren't even like social studies.
Right. Yeah, I filled out another class. Can't remember which one.
Yeah, I can't remember either, but not important, just not social studies.
Exactly. Dang it.
It's like it still exists.
Right.
How do in our social construct?
That sounds smart. Write that down.
Write it down.
These are like these people don't actually know what they're talking about.
No, he's gonna say,
No.
I don't actually know what I'm talking about.
Dr. Butler is watching this, Alexa. Why would you say
I
that?
know what
He's
I'm talking about,
literally
I
agreeing
promise.
us.
You can take my notes.
Oh, you don't understand. I thought you were saying he was gonna be like, I don't know what I'm talking about. I was like,
No,
Alexa,
no, no. I
Why
was
would you
saying
say
about
that?
me. I would never say that about you, I promise.
Okay, guys. Okay, reflections.
Anyways.
I thought it was really interesting how slavery was just like common among everyone, like no matter the race. Because now I feel like it's instilled in us when we think of slavery, we think of African American slavery.
Yes,
Like we
exactly.
never think of anything else when it's like it actually stemmed from everyone being in slavery, and it's just like, well, if you didn't live where the superior people lived, sorry about your luck.
Yeah.
So then, like, to justify that slavery, they had to say that certain people were inferior, and that's where they were like grouped people together.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I
Wait,
learned that in
This is the one we put like personal stories, right? Or like
Yeah, we
like
can.
thoughts. Okay,
So we can say yeah.
I had a friend in high school, and she was like, she's black, but she was adopted into a white family. So, and when we would like learn about like, it's time for history, let's talk about slavery, because that was very in our country's history, whatever.
Right.
Like the teacher like asked her what she knows about it, as if she was like a slave or something.
Yeah, right?
But
Okay.
That's kind of gross.
That's
and,
Yeah.
and she was the
Like,
only
it's-
African American student in the room, and like pointed her
Like,
out.
Like, picked her out of.
And I just like I heard that and I was like, "Are you kidding me?"
Yeah. It kind of goes back to the first episode where we said the elephant in the room.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
It's
Yeah.
crazy.
Because, like, that is making it seem like it's only her history.
Yeah.
Like, slavery is only, like, no, that is everyone's history. Like,
And that she should just already know
yeah,
everything about it. Like,
because you're black. Like, you
Yeah.
should know what slavery was.
right.
No.
Yikes. That feels awful.
Okay, Alexa, I'm gonna have you enter that in as well.
Alrighty. Guys, I'm letting you know right now my keyboard's like broken, so if you see me slamming, if that's me.
You're just really fired up about
Yeah, social studies, man. Makes me hype. It actually does. I love social
I do
studies.
too.
Am I putting it after this sentence?
Yeah, we love social studies so much. It's our favorite
It,
class.
honestly, it is my favorite. See, guys, I already missed a meeting.
I fixed it for you, girl.
Thank you. I really appreciate
Okay,
it.
so
You're gonna
I
have
need,
to do
like-
that.
Any reflections that everyone has that's like, oh, this was so interesting to me, you know? I think also reflecting on the genetics. I don't know why that was like,
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
I think everyone should. That's crazy.
Yeah.
You could even say how you reflected on the penguins thing, because that was really good. Like Macy brought up a great point.
She sure did.
She sure did.
We can just follow behind you in here, and then like we'll type in the letters you missed. Like,
Yeah, I was doing that. Oh my god, I'm so weird.
She
No,
was doing that.
no, I was doing that to try to like, whenever you know when you're trying to think of a word and you can't quite get it. I like,
Yep.
I just like try to
Yep.
figure it out, like doing emotion
As
of
you're
what it is, and it actually worked. It
Hey.
worked that time. I was going like this, trying to figure out singled out.
Ah.
Oh wait, I forgot to mention that my friend is African American.
like going along, not even
Yeah,
talking about
he's
it.
gonna be like, what does that have to do with anything?
I think it can even relate to like what we talked about, what is social studies, because it's like diving in deeper to what we've always been taught in social studies, and like this is like our history that I didn't know about, and like I don't know if you guys learned anything about it, but like I feel like that's probably something we should learn a little bit more about the history. And we don't have to, like, that doesn't mean every student should listen to all these podcasts, but more like here's an overview of what actually happened and how these things came to be.
It's almost like they've like left that out on purpose or something. Like,
Yeah.
that's not like a part of anything that I ever remember learning about, like any of that. So
Is it letting you know?
No.
Okay, I guess I can just do it. But no, I think that's good. Like, yeah, I should probably add that. Where is it?
this is so funny. I'm just like watching him do it.
No, it's actually like tripping me out. I need to like focus on my thing. But, like it's all like
It all shifts.
It's gonna take off like points because we're not talking. We're just typing. We're collecting our
We're thinking.
thoughts.
Yeah. I don't know. I feel like the biggest thing that I said in my reflection was about race is not biologically, it's just genetically the same.
Mm-hmm.
And like that we may not look the same, but we all are humans and we all have the same feelings, emotions, thoughts,
Yeah.
that type of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
wait. Somebody read my sentence and tell me how I can wrap this up.
I can.
The teacher asked her what.
I want to do like something like how every race was slaves, but how do I write this?
I have that in here.
Okay, so then should I just leave it at that, or should we move my sentence to like not be the closer? Because it doesn't really have a good ending. Apparently there's a really good sunset right now. My friend just texted me.
I hate that when I leave class and it's dark out and everyone's like, the sky tonight. I'm like,
Shut up.
I'm like in class.
We're in Central Hall. There's no
Yeah.
windows. I'm like,
wow,
oh,
it's
window.
nice.
Must be nice.
Just because you're in all these details already.
That's so
This
All right.
story spoke volumes.
Well, okay. Well, you're finishing up
You
that
got it.
because I think that reflection's good. Like reflecting on it. Relationship to social studies is a little bit.
Wait, you should have to put like our names on like what?
We don't have to put our names. It's just like if you
That was for us.
had
Okay,
a
okay.
specific reflection. Because
Okay.
if it says we all reflected on it.
Yeah.
You're currently reflecting.
Yeah. He said that was okay.
We're here right now.
Let's start talking about the Made in America.
Okay, episode 3.
Okay, I've got a lot of Hebrew things. That's
Okay, episode 3. I did have a lot for this one too.
I just wrote a lot of notes on each of the stories. Like
mm-hmm.
the first one about John Punch running away, alongside the Dutchman and a Scotsman, and they were all like servants or whatever, and then chased down and caught. But the Dutchman and the Scotsman were only given 4 years of servitude as punishment, and Punch was served with life of flavor. Some Africans are effectively enslaved in Virginia by 1640, and Punch appears to be the first case of the first explicit approval of lifelong servitude.
Sorry, I'm trying to figure out what I meant by this. I thought the story of the Elizabeth Key,
Mm-hmm.
she was biracial, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she was enslaved and made a case that she should be free because she was a Christian and because her father was free.
Mm-hmm.
And paternity arrived from the father, and they couldn't enslave a Christian. So like then the idea of like their idea of race wasn't valid if they let her go. You know what I'm saying? So then they changed the rule.
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting. Like they kept on changing things to fit their narrative, basically.
And they were like tricky about it because when they changed that law, it said that the status of a child derived from the mother instead of the father, which we knew like white men were doing stuff that they were not supposed to be doing, and having biracial children, and then it wasn't usually going the other way around or anything like that. So they were like,
Yeah, I thought it was really sad how like the women kind of got screwed over because they couldn't help it if they got pregnant. Like if they were raped or anything or had relations with like other men or whatever, like white men, like they were able to have sex with anyone without any drawback.
Yeah.
Like they are not pregnant with the baby, so
Yeah.
then they don't have to.
like the white men could
You know what I
essentially just
mean?
like have a bunch of kids with women, like enslaved women, and then those women and the children couldn't do anything about it.
Yeah,
and the white
and
men
it
were
was
like,
just like this line of slavery then because
Yeah.
obviously they're gonna have black kids,
Yeah.
and then I thought that was screwed up.
I don't know if this is actually related.
Who was it that we were talking about in class that one day?
The one
The
drop roll,
president? No.
Thomas Jefferson.
Yes, and how he
Yep.
he enslaved his kids after
Mm-hmm.
all that. Like, that was insane to hear about someone that
Oh,
we like
yeah.
idolize in our country.
Is that in this episode? Which episode is that in?
It's later.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just bringing it up.
Yeah,
'cause
yeah.
You said something that like reminded
Yeah.
me of it.
The one thing so here we have what built slavery was inseparable from whiteness today. I kind of want to switch that out to one thing I wrote, which was most Americans have an idea of what slavery was, though most have a varnished view. Like they thought that like, oh well, house slavery wasn't as bad, or some slave owners treated, and they even talked about that, how like some stories, especially like we learned about this later, how like in some textbooks in Texas when that was like one of our LAs, they were like, well, some slave owners treated their people really good, like they treated their slaves good. Have an idea what slavery was. There was
That's
Okay.
crazy.
I know that.
Because
and
They're slaves.
and
Oh,
they're
sorry,
like,
this is-
but it was not that way at all. Like they were treated. So like I know it's kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but like in key vocabulary, they talked about how like chattel slavery, that is
I have that.
that's what our slavery was, which is like treating, like he said, slaves weren't treated like livestock. They were treated as livestock because that's what they were. Like they were
Yeah.
sold and traded, and like bred for work, like, which is crazy.
it's actually insane.
I like they talked about the slave codes and the
I also
Bacon's
said
Rebellion.
the free is added to white.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was interesting because it's like, yeah, like at one time white people were enslaved too.
Yes.
And then they added free to white. It's not that white people like means
No.
free.
Mhm.
And I thought that was interesting.
Because I had that historian say indentured servants from Europe outnumbered the slaves from
Yeah.
Africa in the 4 colonies until later in the 1600s when
Yeah.
like the slave trade opened up a lot more. So
And then like when the Naturalization Act of 1970 like basically defined a citizen as a white person,
Yep.
then that's when like all the other races, you're either slaves or you're other free persons. Like you're not citizens, you're not
I'm gonna
white,
add
like
to
that
I
kind
wrote-
of thing.
I wrote down only free whites can be naturalized as
Mhm.
citizens.
Yeah.
And the men who shaped the United States defined it as a country by and for all people they labeled white.
I'm gonna say they also said this was the first time the word white was used as a label.
Okay, now I'm thinking why I said this back to the biracial people because I remember reading about this or hearing it. The biracial people like they didn't support the idea that blackness means slavery
Mm-hmm.
and whiteness means freedom because if you're biracial, what does that make you? So then it was like they didn't fit into those justifications. So I thought that was like really interesting, and then they basically did the 3/5 of whatever.
Yeah. I just put that there was like 2 great divisions because before that wasn't it like the poor and the wealthy? But now
Yes.
it's like it's the blacks and the white, not just the rich and the poor.
Yeah,
so
it
like
was-
that was
John C. Calhoun, he said, with us, the 2 great divisions of society are not the rich and the poor, but the white and the black. And all the former, the poor as well as the rich, belong to the upper class and are respected and treated as equal. So it was like, that was the first time when people started seeing the divide in Americans as race, not like class. Because it used to be like what your class was, but now it's like, oh, you're either black or white. Like,
Is that something that that's a good point. Unless it like kind of fits into the key point we already have. Because we do have a lot of key points.
I think it's okay.
Okay.
Because we did say it was like, when we talked about the Naturalization Act, we said it was like the first time white was being used. And I think that was kind of like what he was
Kinda
getting
like-
at.
there we go. Okay.
For vocab, I added to the already like census and servitude, I added chattel slavery because it's the first time it's brought up, and then I think the guy on the phone defined racism this way, which I really liked.
I had it and then I deleted it because I was like, oh, that's like too simple. But I was like, well, actually, that's probably good to be
Right.
defined.
And I was like, I agree. I like putting that in there. So
Mm-hmm. Okay, I like those vocab ones.
I think that was good too.
So an overview.
So it says about how American slavery came to be today, as well as how that connects to the construction of whiteness, dives into how power and laws really kept solidifying and intensifying slavery.
I don't know. Overview is so hard.
I
I just
know.
like.
Okay, well, let's start. We can talk about how I think it'd be important in the overview to talk about this is the first time that like the one drop rule was brought up. So how that really started to define race.
And how they started to define like what's a citizen, what's not a citizen, and that was purely based on race.
And what they just decided was like what they
Mhm.
wanted. That didn't make sense. They decided. Yeah. Okay, it's fine.
You got this.
Yeah.
Okay, this person we're introduced to the one drop rule and defining who is a citizen and who isn't.
The first time that white was really ever, or
Mhm. Like black and
Yeah,
white
yeah.
was considered
Mm.
the division of people, not your class,
Yeah, because it was purely Good point.
instead of being like rich or poor.
Okay, well, she's doing that. Anybody have a good relationship to social studies?
I think you could also talk about how this episode talked about like the loopholes in laws for rich slave owners for like fathering or like enslaving their own children kind of thing, and the power that brought. And then also how power was brought to slave owners, especially through the Virginia slave codes.
I'm trying to think of the word I want to use here. Innocent? Is that the word?
Yeah, like above the law. Or like, yeah. Yeah.
What was the rest of it? Discusses the loopholes created in the
Relationships,
system
like, you remember how we
to
talked
keep
about
white men
whenever
above the
LAs
law.
And how
about,
the
like,
Virginia
not
slave
using textbooks
codes
as
gave
much
ultimate power
because of like
to the slave
the
owners.
narrative. I don't know if we should put something like that in
Yeah,
there.
yeah,
Dude,
yeah.
that was good.
That was good. That was good. Okay.
Except for the
Okay, time
relationship.
out because yes. Okay, you guys can keep talking. I'm just gonna.
Wait, how the Virginia slave codes?
Gave ultimate power to the rich slave owners, the rich white slave owners.
Oh, I was like, I spelled Virginia right. Why are you telling me it's wrong?
I think it was also mentioned something about like through chattel slavery and the 3/5 rule from Congress, like slaves are beginning to be seen as like livestock or less than human or like as property.
What module was that?
think it was module 2. Wait, no.
Three? Oh, 4, because there was 2 on master narrative, 1 on social studies, so it would have been module 4.
No, module 4 was source. Wait,
Yeah.
Source. I think it was our first element. I think it was
About
module
textbooks?
2.
I think
Yeah.
it was. Yeah.
Oh, you're saying not like as a secondary source. I was gonna relate it to being a
Oh,
secondary
you could do
source. and
that.
not
Yeah,
like-
that's module 4.
So I was saying module 2 and 4.
We're talking about the varnished view of slavery from textbooks? Or what did you say?
Yeah, like how this can relate to us as teachers not using textbooks as much to like teach this topic because it's just gonna give varnished views.
Mitochondria.
I know that word.
So you can sort of reflections.
It looks familiar.
Yeah, everything's our reflections.
Yeah, they were cooking on that stuff. I was listening.
You thought it was interesting?
Yeah, so these are a lot of thoughts. But this is for varnished view of slavery.
I spelled place wrong and it autocorrected to palace. Systems were put into palace.
Okay, do you have anything to add about the textbooks? I just said oftentimes textbooks have a varnished view of slavery. So making sure to support what we are teaching with more reliable sources can be important. It can be beneficial.
No, I think that's good. Just giving dangerous to younger kids as they are learning to be better citizens.
Is that what it is? That is so
Literally.
perfect.
Amazing.
That is.
Talk more.
Keep going.
Oh, I have
Never stop.
oftentimes too. Come on now.
It is on fire.
You could just say that, like, well, I guess you already said finding other resources.
Anything else relationship to social studies education, like how we're going to teach? Guys, we're so bad at this.
Well, I'm working on our reflections.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm not your business.
Alright, so. Oh, that was crazy.
You might have to back me up if my keyboard decides to die.
Okay, I got you.
I feel like we could even relate it to like the power concept that it was talking about, how like when people gain power they overlook their wrongdoings. And I think even like being in a teacher position you have power, so make sure you don't overlook your own.
Yeah.
You know?
I feel like those in power too, like, find ways to like justify their actions, and because they're in power, people are like, oh, okay, like, makes sense. It doesn't, but.
Yeah.
And I
To
feel
like influence how we teach or
yeah. And I was gonna just say, like, also from a kid's point of view, because, you know, they are young and, like, they still, maybe we could just keep on going back to, like, the elephant in the room, but, like, it's true, like, they might actually feel like that, so, like, making sure that they're still, like, inclusive and, like, not so, like, pointed out when it's talked about.
Is that good?
Don't let that influence how we teach or view our students from a child's point of view. Make sure they feel included within the environment. Perfect.
Okay, move on to the next episode.
Should we say within the environment and their peers? Like it, about being
Yeah.
included, like feeling.
So like make sure they feel included within the environment and around their peers.
Yeah.
Okay, so on Crazy We Built a Nation. We're gonna start that one. You can keep
Okay.
cooking.
Okay.
There's-
F4.
I need to pull my laptop in. It's like
Okay. Halfway, guys.
Is this when we're introduced to Pocahontas?
We're introduced to Jefferson. I like that one.
yeah, this one's gonna be, I think, a lot about the master narrative.
The master narrative just keeps coming back.
Okay, and talking about the biracial thing, this is when the Racial Integrity Act of 1924 was like included, and it was trying to prevent race mixing.
Yes.
Because like, if you had, so then it said like if you had any African ancestry, you were colored. So then like
And
white
it's also
people were up to 116.
another one of those like power things when that ruling came into effect in 1680 for what was it? Ruling may affect Wolfe and Pocahontas' children, but they were the exception
Mm-hmm.
because they made them white.
I thought that was crazy.
And then in 1924 they did the Racial Integrity Act.
I thought a lot about how Jefferson, like in the Declaration of Independence, it talked about how all men are created equal and they had the unalienable rights. So it's like
Mhm.
life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And then it talked about it later on, how MLK like said in his speech that it was like a promise that to like all black people basically that they would gain those rights, and like Jefferson didn't make that promise basically, and like how it was a fantasy kind of for like all the black people
Yeah.
because they were looking at it like as their way out, but it really wasn't because it wasn't like what Jefferson was saying.
Yeah, like I thought that was interesting. Like all people created equal when it wasn't a time where they were treating people
Yeah.
equally.
No, not at all.
And it was like men because you were only like a male citizen if you were white.
Yeah.
His thoughts were all over the place, you can decide. And self-interest one.
Also, when they talked about Emerson, the writer or whatever, when like he actually thought slavery was bad for enslavers, he didn't oppose slavery like people thought.
Yeah.
Like we've always been taught that, you know. I thought that was interesting. It's like, again, like the master narrative.
I wrote that he was painted to be an anti-racist and good man, but he wasn't. He did not oppose slavery out of concern for enslaved people.
Yeah,
He just thought it was bad. Yeah, it was too barbaric for people like him, he said.
And we don't have this in there yet?
We have this, but like, you know what I'm saying? So it's like he thought slavery was bad for enslavers, but not actually for the enslaved.
Like he thought it was like a bad look for,
Yeah.
That's
okay.
crazy.
Yeah.
like it was.
Emerson?
Yeah.
Did he say? Yeah.
I think another thing I wanted to put that really stuck out to me was, oh my gosh, Jefferson was likely not a product of his time. Several people wrote and challenged his race. He was like known as being racist in his time. Like it wasn't, that was the way of thinking, which I think a lot of like textbooks and curriculum like says otherwise. They're like, well, everyone thought like slaves, like no.
Yeah.
And
so
His
this
ideas
idea
were really radical for
everyone
his
thinks
time.
the same at the time is not true.
Mhm.
That's good.
Didn't it say that he like would say to everybody that he wanted equality, but then like his actions didn't
Yeah.
really prove that he really did. Obviously, because what we learned in class
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
him having his kids as slaves.
He was a
Just like-
I again talked about where did this go? Oh, we take things that are hard and we give out explanations to make us feel better. Cause like that's been brought up in each episode. I feel like this justification of what we're doing.
Yeah.
And it's like, when does that stop? When do we stop justifying it and own up to what it is?
Well, if you read
Yeah,
textbooks,
great point.
never, because I feel
Yeah.
like in a lot of them, they're still
Yeah.
justifying like what we said earlier. I think Macy, you said it. How they're like, well, oh my god, I just lost my train of thought.
How,
And
But-
we were just talking about it.
I think I never, what she said earlier,
Yeah.
how in the Texas textbooks, they were saying like, yeah, he had slaves, but it was okay because of this reason.
Because he treated him
Yeah.
really good. Yes, thank you. Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
it literally, we talked about that earlier, how it
Yeah.
like goes in and then right back out.
Yeah.
And like they still say that in textbooks, like they still try to justify it, like, well, they were treated, some of them were treated really nice, so
That-
maybe it
yeah.
wasn't so bad or something. It's like,
They were still slaves.
Yeah,
They
like,
still own slaves.
I don't think
Yep.
that's not.
Overall, that
And it's just like,
trumps it.
yeah, people feeling like they deserve it over others, like, is just, that's just wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At the end, the guy, the really smart one,
Mhm.
he's talking about the Jefferson Memorial, and he's like, to a white person, it's inspiring, but to a black person, it's offensive. And I was like, had to think about that, and I was like, dang, because like that just fits into the master narrative as well. It's like what you're taught, and we're not including everyone. That's not like a mirror for everyone.
Yeah.
Because not everyone's seeing themselves through this Jefferson Memorial.
Because so many people, like, growing up in schools, they were told, like, he was this great person
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
everything
He was
like
so
that.
And if you
idolized.
win, it's like, wow. But like
Right.
in reality, people are gonna feel left out and be like, that's not wow. That's offensive.
They made it like this beautiful building, like to just like show like he was a great person, whatever. But like, he wasn't, and like the like black people find it offensive, like
Mhm.
absolutely.
Mhm.
Like hearing these things, like as a college student, I'm hearing these things for the first time
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like that
about
probably
a
should
common
happen.
name in our history
Yeah.
is actually crazy.
And even in class when you talk about it, it's like, we're still not gonna go tell a bunch of young kids,
Yeah,
this is, he did this and this, but it is like, like making sure people know
Yeah.
this happened, he
it's
did
crazy.
good things and he did bad things.
Yeah, it should not be completely idolized for
Mhm.
even if they're doing bad things. If I don't know if I'm just like pulling this out of nowhere, but if it was like an African American person that had like been in Thomas Jefferson's place, they would probably talk about the bad things that he did over the good
And he
things.
said, yeah.
What's that like term, the heroic, when we like make people in
Heroism?
history, heroism, like we make people the heroes, like when you literally just talked about that,
Yeah.
giving him that power, being like, wow, he's such a good dude, he's such a hero for America.
Right.
Yeah.
Like literally to some people he's not.
Yeah.
And that was just like a crazy realization for me.
Because, like, when you actually know, you're like, oh, he sucks. And it sucks, like you were saying, like, being so far in life and, like, I don't want to say so old because we're not old, but, you know, like,
Yeah, just,
in college and just now learning about it, like,
Mhm.
after all these years, it's like, oh, like, does
Yeah.
that make you, like, part of the problem, kind of? But,
But like
Oh,
really,
yeah,
it's
true.
not. It's the school's problem
Mhm.
because the school, or like
It's
at
not
least
in
the
the curriculum.
teachers should
Yeah.
be teaching it.
I think that would be a good relationship to social studies is like as teachers, we become the problem when we don't like shed light on these things. That makes sense?
Yeah. I
Oh.
think that's good.
So I think, yeah, I agree. Does anyone have any more key vocabulary, or are we just good with Saxons and a Saxonist?
Yeah, I didn't have a lot of
That's
vocabulary.
what I
do
had.
not have that either.
That was what I had. I added Saxonist because that's what the lady referred to Jefferson as,
Mhm.
which is kind of almost like an early version of like a white supremacist, like being
Mm.
like, we are the almost, what was it called? What Hitler was, but like Aryan, like you believe like that was the best race,
Is
like
that-
them
I
being
think
like
that-
pure. That's what being a Saxonist was.
Okay.
He believed that like his own what he was basically was the most pure, the best race because it was the most pure.
Yeah.
So like early ideas of like what we had talked about, like genocide, like keeping those enslaved people who are inferior enslaved because they're a slavish race, like you had talked about. Right, relationship to social studies education.
Okay, yeah.
So we talked about,
Not just focusing on the good, giving
Yeah.
like the mirror, like making sure all students feel included, like especially when talking about these kind of people and being like, not everyone's gonna think of them as this hero.
right,
We
Yes.
do a disservice.
we do,
Does-
yeah.
Is that what? Does that sound right?
Yes.
Okay. I read it in my head and I was like, we do a disservice. Like it
Oh,
sounds
yeah,
funny
no.
coming out of my mouth. Okay.
No, that sounds right. So I think,
That's really good.
are we can relate it to, is it okay relating it back, do we wanna relate it back to the textbook analysis of being like, oh, these textbooks are not telling the full story
Yeah,
of
I
these
mean,
people, or
that's
do we
good.
wanna relate it,
Both.
I guess that's still a master
And the master
narrative.
narrative. I would say
Okay.
both because like I just think the example of like some kids are gonna find the memorial amazing, some kids are gonna find it offensive. It's the mirrors and windows. Like these kids aren't seeing themselves. And I
So I
also
guess
talked about like
love
the
it when
still
things connect.
justifying.
I think that's where it like becomes like our job to, like, if we do use a textbook to like get other information and sources as well, to be like, so this is what your textbook says about like, if it's like talking about, obviously it'll talk about only like the good things or mostly the good things or whatever, but then finding another source that's like, but this is also what had happened either at that time or this person did this as well, and then letting your students like have their own like opinion and thoughts on like
Yeah.
all of the information that they have, and then they can do with it what they want, essentially. Like that falls on us as teachers to like give them that information.
Yeah.
too.
Otherwise we become part of the problem, like you said. And I have like even I don't know about you guys, but in school I read Emerson. I remember that name. I remember reading him.
I don't know.
Oh wow. Well, like if I was the teacher and I was having my students read that, which is more of a high school level, so I don't think we'll run into this problem. But it's like even talking maybe about a little bit about him and talking about some of the things, like what he believed would be good. And it's not even like now we're not gonna read this and we're gonna boycott him, but more like here's a little bit more information.
Going off of that, at least bringing it to their attention that there are some things that are not true in these textbooks, or like things that are being purposely left out,
Yeah.
so that if you're not allowed to teach it in class, they can at least become curious and find these things out on their own.
Yeah.
It'll at least be like in the back of their mind, like you said, if you're not allowed to teach it or
Yeah.
something, like if you kind of like hint at it, I guess, essentially, or whatever,
Yeah.
like it'll be in the back of their mind, like, okay, maybe not actually, and then
I would
hopefully
have
their
definitely done
curiosity
some more
gets the best of
research.
them and they actually look it up on their own and
Yeah,
like they're actually able to learn.
definitely.
So I said, what I added to what Brittany said, most if not all classroom textbooks will promote the master narrative of Jefferson being the phenomenal writer of the Declaration of Independence and being progressive for his time by writing that all men were created equal, when in reality he was a racist slave owner and did not believe the words he wrote in that document.
Can I break this up into 2 sentences just
Go
because
for
it's
it.
getting a little long?
As teachers,
That's good.
it is essential, crucial actually, crucial that we find accurate and complete sources to tell more than just one story.
I think also mentioning making our students feel like they're being seen. Like, because I think a lot of this is just like, I don't know, we can forget about that and how they might view things differently than we do.
Yeah.
So more than just one story so that we, okay. But is that going back to like what Alexa had said, where like, what kind of mirror are we holding up?
Do we have them in there?
I know, but like, is that being like, if you have like a black child in your classroom holding up a mirror and being like, your people were slaves, like is that
No,
what
but,
that's
like,
saying?
being,
That's
like-
like the only way
No, like
I'm
being
like reading
aware of how they may feel when talking about lessons.
Like,
Or like,
Like,
when
you know
they're
what
yourself
I'm
in
like,
their
talking
shoes.
yeah.
it. So not holding up a mirror. I was like, I don't think that's right. Being like,
no,
so we just
being
had said
like-
that earlier. We're like, we don't like how that was.
No, sorry. Like making sure like we're aware
So
of
should
like
we find accurate and complete sources
what they're
to
gonna
more than just
think.
one story. We also should be mindful of how some students may feel. I know. Oh, fell. Jeez. Some tough subjects that involve people like them. People that look like them?
So
Is that what
People
you're
that they can relate to.
They can relate to slaves? I don't know.
Oh,
I don't like how I'm
Wait.
Oh, God.
My
That's why
bad.
this whole part I'm like,
Wait.
I don't want to make it sound bad.
Okay, here, let me read it. I think just this. I think just like literally just the simple like we just have to understand how they are gonna feel.
Yeah.
And like conscious of that.
Is there like a max time that this video is supposed to be? Because we're at
1:10.
an hour.
Well, we only have 2 more things.
Okay.
Well, we have
We'll just
2 episodes. So we're gonna
yeah,
have
2 more episodes. We'll
Okay,
be
we
fine.
can go. So reflections.
I'll do reflections. You guys
We
work on the
got
next
we
one.
keep going. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have some thoughts, but you don't have to go on with them. 5. Okay. Little War on the Prairie.
Episode 5 was
I-
crazy.
I thought this
That
was
was crazy.
so insane.
I
have
thought
a
it
lot.
was crazy when he was like, most people don't know about it because the Civil War was also going on, and I was like, yeah, I've never heard this in my life.
I have never ever heard of it.
No,
I've
me neither.
heard of it once, but it was like when I was way younger. Like
Yeah.
it wasn't like brought up.
Never
This
heard
was
of it.
all new information for me, and it was mind blowing.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, this one's a lot to unpack.
I feel like when they
I was excited for this one to come up.
Me too, but like, woo, where do you even
There's
begin?
a lot because it's just like a story basically. It's
Yeah.
not like how the other ones are
Yeah.
yeah.
with like mini stories. This is like the whole
Yeah.
thing.
And like Jefferson being like, here, sign treaties, and we'll like, you know what I'm saying, like
Knowingly
pushing
and
them into
purposely.
debt, like
Yeah.
purposely
Yes.
doing that because he knew that he could get lands.
Yeah.
They could get land.
He knew it was gonna work, and like he was
Left
like,
out
they
a
don't,
key fact.
And I thought that was crazy.
and we don't like Sibley.
No.
I almost liked him. I
No.
almost liked him in the beginning. Jerk.
Jordan and she
Jerk.
said some very
Not nice things.
not nice things. It was funny. My hands
Henry
go a lot
playing
longer than I
them.
thought they did.
Because he was in debt was also crazy. It's like,
Yes.
it just shows the self-interest
Mm-hmm.
that people have and the thinking of superiority.
I'm saying like the advantage that he just automatically had, like, you know. And then Little Crow did not want to start a fight, and then I was like,
Yeah.
but then,
Yeah.
because he was pretty adamant about staying on their land and not fighting, and then they do, and then, didn't they say like in newspapers or something, like essentially like their media or whatever was like saying how, like, the Dakota were just going and just killing like a bunch of innocent people, like just crazy,
Yeah,
like just like
um,
randomly over a what'd they say? It was like a target contest or something like that.
I
yes.
can't remember.
Hold
Like
on.
they made it seem like it was
Yeah,
just this.
yeah.
This is what started it, and that's it. Like they tried making it seem like there was no backstory on it or anything like that.
Is it like where they went to the town and like? Was that what you're talking about?
It was like they started talking about it in the very beginning, I think.
Okay, then maybe.
Yeah, it was like the
hold on.
beginning of how it all started or whatever.
Yeah, but they like
Yeah.
washed over that at first. Like in history, they were like, they just said this is what started it. Is that they, I can't remember what they said they were doing, and like they did target practice and then killed 5 settlers and then went back,
Yes.
and then they were like, oh, this is what happened, and then they were like, well, now we have to go to war.
Yes. That's
Instead
what
of
I
like
read.
including all of this other stuff about like Sibley
Yes.
and the
Yes, yes,
treaties
yes.
and stuff
Yeah.
like that.
Triggered the bloody Sioux. Is that how you say it?
Mm-hmm.
Sioux uprising of 1862. Is what I read.
I have something I have is the concentration camp and Camp Lincoln. Like basically giving to the idea that's like when we talked about Hitler, where he got the idea of concentration camps, it literally came from us.
Yeah. There it is.
And
It's
the
like, also
Sibley
never
Park,
heard of that.
yeah,
Like,
and the Sibley Park like shows the heroic attitudes instead of like the real narrative, and just giving these people heroism or whatever.
And it wasn't when they were at the Lincoln camp. Is that when like they were awaiting
Yeah.
They said it was like 303
Yeah.
Dakotas who they were supposed to hang, and then they sent like
Yeah.
the list to Lincoln. And then like while they're at this
Yes.
camp, people were still killing them. Like
Yeah.
they would shoot them or whatever, and so like they weren't technically supposed to be being killed, but they were anyways. And then he reduced that list from like 303 to 30, it was 39, and then he got it to 38, and then they all died together. Yeah, they were like holding hands.
Yeah,
and,
I
Yeah,
wrote
that, like,
4,000 people came to watch. them
yeah,
go
from
out.
miles away,
Yeah.
like miles and miles.
That is crazy.
Yeah. And then Little Crow killed 6 months
Exactly.
later.
Why would you want to watch someone get killed? Personally,
Not just
me.
one
Yeah.
person.
Yeah,
38.
people.
38. Crazy.
And like throughout it, they just were trying to portray a message. Like, there's a delusion about who we are. We reinvent fake history. I thought that was powerful because it's like portraying this beautiful message of Minnesota and how it came to be when it's like, you have no idea.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved the part when they talked about the kids.
Sibley was only 23 years old, guys.
Really?
That's crazy.
From
Did it say that in the
Detroit.
episode?
Yes, he's from
How did I miss
Detroit.
that?
He moved to Minnesota from Detroit in the 1830s at age 23. And then he was in charge of overseeing the southern half of what is now Minnesota. And then he had a kid. And
How did he get all this power? So young.
Almost 23.
a child.
Wow. That's crazy.
I still don't like him, but he was a child, essentially. Like I feel like that's so young.
And the
Yeah,
fact that he
Well, they
was
were
like,
dying. at
I was
younger
just gonna
ages back
say,
then,
maybe it
too,
wasn't
right?
as
So,
It's like middle
young.
age.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
him, like,
I was gonna say.
he's a man. I still don't like him.
no, I know, but talking about the kids and how like even the people that were from like I think it was one of the Dakotas. He said that there was only like a few of them that actually knew like what it was. The rest of them had no idea. I thought
Yeah.
that was crazy because they lived there. Like you think that they would like be taught a little bit more about
Right.
like locally where they're from.
Like their local history.
Yeah.
I'm kind of similar to Carla. I said all students are required to learn about this war in Minnesota. Because the one guy, I don't remember who it was, but he was like a guest talking about how he
Yeah.
when he lived there, and they have to talk about it. But why are they only talking about this in that state, like where
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
what happened?
I have that too, but I also have that like the teachings depended. Like the teachers were even
Yeah.
talking about what they talked about, and it was like some talked about it as a conflict, and where they had to solve the conflict, and the white settlers had to fight back to protect themselves.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was just
And,
about to
like,
say, I remember hearing that clip
yeah.
from one teacher, and she was saying how the only way they knew how to solve conflict was through like violence and stuff like that. I was like,
Yep.
leaving out a whole thing.
And it just shows how much power the teachers have
Yeah.
to create their own narrative too.
Well, because your students trust you and the information that you're telling them, so they'd
Yeah.
be like, oh wow, like all that they knew how to do was have violence and kill and stuff like that, and the white settlers were just, they were just trying to build America, and these guys come killing them for no reason, essentially, is how I took how she was probably teaching that lesson. I was disturbed.
And like I liked how Minnesota's governor Mark Dayton, he like says the U.S. He even mentions the U.S. used deception and force to take Indian lands. So it's like they're finally talking about the real things, and so we want to like as teachers acknowledge that and like, reinforce those things.
And then just hearing, I can't remember her name, that was in the podcast when they went to that, the anniversary, the 150th anniversary of it, or whatever, they were like on the border or something. And he said that, and she was like, it affected me in a way like I didn't even realize it was going to. And like, so like there are people that it does affect, so it's important to talk about like the whole thing.
Macy,
I guess that would be
anything
the
to add in this
relationship
one
to social
since
media.
you've been writing away.
I almost had this last one.
I think that was good though. Does anybody have key vocabulary? I have none for this one
No,
because I think I was just so busy, like
listening
listening and
and noting,
like
Yeah.
being like,
Because there was so much
holy
new
crap.
information. I was like writing
Yeah.
these like facts. I do not have any.
I just felt like a powwow because I remember them talking about a powwow in it, and like maybe somebody didn't know about it. Because remember they had to like turn the cameras off and he couldn't like listen to anything.
Oh yeah.
Do you want to put that in there?
Yeah.
So then the overview. This is a big overview.
Yeah, there's a lot to get
There's a
into
lot in
this.
this one.
Also, they did say, quote, "This was the bloodiest day in American history." And my note from that was quoting that, and then I said, "And I've never heard of it?" Question mark.
Of course, so
Oh,
yeah.
good.
I think one thing
That's
for the overview too, I put as like my ending point. I said we as Americans have reinvented a fake history for ourselves that doesn't deal with the complexities, often mistaking our true history for a heritage of self-congratulatory false history. So for that, I meant like, he had even said like being in the North, you're like, we were not bad. Like we were the right guys. We were like enlightened. Like, and they can talk about that in the next episode, another sneak peek. But he was like,
Last episode.
like you don't have. I don't know. I think
Yep.
it's important that, like, it may not. Minnesota's history may not have had at this point in time a lot to deal with like slavery necessarily, but it still was very wrong in the way it handled other people of color, like the Native Americans. So.
You can put that in the overview. You said it and it was so smart, but
You said some huge words.
you said some
that-
big
yeah,
words
that
and
are so key.
wow.
It might be a quote, but I didn't put anything. So.
So in 1862, there's a U.S. Dakota War with the largest mass execution in U.S. history. There's deception and trickery on the Dakota people by white settlers that leads to war. So then we as Americans have reinvented what Macy said, and then like we often justify it and gloss over the theft.
Should we add in there the bloodiest day in American history?
Yeah, go for it.
I
like
don't.
that.
I don't know where you want me to.
Well, I would put it in a key understanding, and then I would put literally your thought. Why haven't I heard this?
Okay, you just want me to make that like a bullet?
Yeah, bullet point.
Will do.
Oh. I want to say that just because it went on the same time as the Civil War. So although Minnesota was like absolved from the Civil War, there were still like ugly parts of their history
Yeah.
that are like glossed over.
Yeah.
So,
So like justifying and glossing over. I have that in there. If you wanna.
the Civil War. I'm about to cook again.
I see the flames.
I
I see
know,
the flames.
I know,
Your keyboard is.
Okay. Let's start while just finishing her little thoughts. Gabby, are you starting the relationship?
Yeah.
Well, and then you have bullet points there too.
I'm in relationship. I just started putting the bullets into sentences.
Oh, you okay?
I'm
Perfect.
so sorry.
No, that's good. Because I feel like when we were talking, I was putting bullet points, so I think we already talked about everything. But just like that relationship of like we have the power to create the narratives,
Mhm.
so we need to be careful of how we're doing that. Like when the teacher talks about how like she teaches it a certain way, like that's not good.
I just put it, it is disturbing as a future educator that there are other teachers who are retelling history in a way that is not true or in its totality. It gives the impression that only one side of the story is correct and that there's nothing more to that narrative. This reflection shows just how important it is to teach every narrative, ... Continue thoughts.
To show both sides of
Of history.
yeah.
And I feel like that.
And even that sometimes it's not always pretty.
Yeah, and that keeps getting brought up.
Like America isn't perfect, and that has to be addressed.
Yes, it's like. Well, it was a thought from someone else in our class. I don't want to take it because it wasn't my thought.
Just say it.
Just cite them at the bottom of this.
Should I say their name?
What are you talking about?
Like someone in our class is a point they made that I remember.
Okay, what's the point? It's fine to say it. You can learn from
Well,
other
now I
people.
forgot because I was talking about other things.
Ah.
Just give me 1 second. Give me 1 second. Let me think.
Okay.
Let me think.
So while you're keeping doing that, I think some other things that like relate to history is like, again, like we've talked about this many times, but again, avoiding people making people heroes, like Sibley Park, crazy.
For real.
And their teachers have the power to make students believe certain things or certain narratives, which we already kind of talked about in that beginning.
Yeah.
I feel like you already talked about that.
Again, I lost it, by the way. It's gone.
You think of it
I I will
should
come
have
back.
just said it.
No, I know, but I didn't want to. I didn't want to in case, because I didn't come up with it.
Okay, so while she's finishing that up, reflections. Does anybody have some reflections? I talked about, I said it's like really sad that Dakota's story isn't being portrayed like it should be, and how we even had concentration camps for them, like lied to them, killing
Yes.
innocent people.
And it was like, it started off like they got tricked, right?
Yeah, they got tricked.
Like that's crazy.
Crazy.
And then all this stuff just like spiraled after it.
I talked a lot about just like the massacre and how it was like the biggest in history. Like
Yeah.
instead of what you
Yeah.
said.
Yeah.
Like,
No, yeah, bring it back up. Because it's huge. Like if they're claiming it's the bloodiest day in American history, and
why is it not talked about?
Exactly.
More? Like, why does not like
Why is
everybody
this-
know about it?
exactly.
I mean, yeah, the civil rights is really, really important,
Mhm.
obviously, because of racism and equality, but at the same time, like, you're talking about, what is it, like 30 over almost 40 people just getting killed at the same time.
Yeah.
Lots of people coming to watch, like,
That's something that you should not just be skipping
yeah.
when it comes to our history.
It's not letting me fix this. Okay, anyways, sorry.
What am I say?
Oh.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Something like that. Also, my nails on these keyboards.
No, it's actually really satisfying.
I have one of those
Alexa's
like,
gonna fall asleep.
I have like a big keyboard at home that I use because I don't like typing on this with nails, and it's like click, 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 click.
Oh, yeah, I know what you mean. I know what you mean.
That's so funny.
I can send you guys an ASMR video.
Stay tuned.
Okay, sorry. Anybody got some reflections? I've got to start, but it's
I would just put, like,
not great.
maybe the fact, like we said, that, like, it's the biggest massacre. Do you want me to put that?
Yeah, go for it. You got it.
And like I never learned or heard anything about this in neither my like Ohio social studies classes or Texas. So it's not like I've gone to school in 2 different states and neither of those states have ever brought it up
Yeah.
in any way. So I feel like that's an issue.
Yeah, definitely. And like how you said, I must have missed that point where you said it's like teachers' responsibility and how they bring it up and how they choose to teach it to their students. That should not be how it is.
Yeah, that like made me really mad how the teachers were like, well, I teach it this way.
Yeah,
I was like,
'cause
what?
You can't teach history based on your opinion. You
Yeah.
need to teach your history on the facts.
Well, I feel like if you just like already know that you're only gonna teach it in one specific way, like you're only gonna tell it essentially like one side of this story, then you probably should not be a history teacher
Oh, yeah,
because I feel like that kind of defeats the purpose of it.
Can I put, like, Brittany even mentioned that she went to, like, different states? and-
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Is it PR? How do you spell it? Is it
TTANY.
Okay, so you're gonna finish that up?
Yeah.
Okay, let's go on to episode 6 and get that done. This video's getting long.
Oh yes. Yep. Like
Yeah.
the girl one.
Yay. Alright, number
Number
6, which we already mentioned, the north and south.
The
and
long-awaited episode 6.
Yay!
Oh, we've been foreshadowing this whole
I know.
time.
Yeah.
Here it is. The season finale.
Like, yeah,
You're
okay.
so funny, guys.
I know.
I hope he has
He's-
fun listening to this while he does his dishes.
He's only his eyes are rolled in the back of his head and he's like, oh my god.
And I know he's like, these ladies are doing more typing than they are talking, but listen, we all got it.
We're Our minds
Like
are like
that.
one right now.
Yeah.
We
We
can
are-
see what we're saying.
Yeah,
We're like, I
this
like
is
what you said. You don't know what it says yet, but
Yeah, yeah. Okay, you're gonna have to follow along.
he thinks we're so funny. He's laughing right now.
No, he's probably like -10.
He's like,
-1.
all right, shut up and get on episode 6. I'm sick of listening to this.
Every
right now.
giggle is a
An
point
hour
off.
and 30 minutes.
We're gonna put 10 points all right there.
Ooh, let's get this guy.
Okay, anyways.
If you spent an hour and a half doing his dishes because of this episode, I'm so sorry. Okay.
I would never do this. I would never have the patience. Okay. Yep. Anyways.
I, for some reason, didn't write a lot of notes for episode 6. I honestly don't really know why.
Probably because you were over it.
I have
I
another
wasn't.
huge quote, guys.
Okay, this was a lot about like how Northerners are innocent and
yes.
Southerners
Yes,
still
yes.
are horrible people.
Yeah.
Yeah, you go on that quote. You got this.
Oh, no, it's at the end. Which is
Okay.
at the end of the thing, so I'll wait.
Okay,
until
okay.
we get there.
I have a quote right away.
Oh,
It's,
you go off then.
Northern whites love the race but hate the people. Southern whites hate the race but
I
love
saw
the
that.
people.
I
And
wrote
I was
that down.
like, that's a little deep.
Yeah.
That's a little deep.
I quoted, I don't know how to say his last name, but it was in the very beginning, and he said, you have to be so articulate and so intelligent and so well-read as a Southerner to vindicate and justify yourself in the world of the North.
Yes, that was good. I said that the South is known for having the race stuff because
I really think that.
was it a guy or a girl that said it? I don't remember. But either way, they were like they moved from the South to the North or something, or to like a different state from the South, and they were like, "Oh, you're from the South with all
Yeah.
that race
What's
stuff,
that like?
Yeah.
Yeah.
all that race
Mhm.
stuff."
Yes.
We don't have that
There-
here.
And
Yeah.
he's like,
race everywhere.
Right. Racism everywhere.
As if the race stuff isn't everywhere in every town, every city, every region, every state. Phillips said that. I'm not sure who Phillips was, but
Guys, we are so
look at this.
connected right now.
Back to what we talked about earlier about like the I don't see race, this whole colorblindness idea. People try not to participate in
Right.
racism, but it's like operating white supremacy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I thought that was crazy.
People from the North, I'm just reading my notes. People from the North feel like they are in some way exempt from being racist or having racism in their states. They believe they aren't in the racist part of the country and feel only the South had any part in the Civil War. Slavery,
Why
and
is there
racism.
no overview for 4? Or am I dumb and just don't see it?
Let me scroll. Where'd it go?
There's no overview.
there is no
Oh, you
Where did that go? Where did that go?
no, I swear
Yeah,
We
there
we
was
wrote
no
one.
overview.
definitely wrote one.
Oh, especially because this was about
Go back into the
Just hit.
No, don't press Control Z. Go into the. Can we see the editing?
I have no idea.
Hold please.
Maybe we try to do this after the video. Maybe let's get this whole video done.
Okay.
And then we'll go back.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
He's been doing
Okay.
his too.
Yeah.
I
I think we need to get this episode done.
Okay, that just made me nervous because I'm like, oh, what the
Yeah,
heck?
you're like,
Oh, we,
okay,
we
I
literally
know
typed
it.
that.
Yeah,
Like, I
we
remember
did. We
typing.
did. Okay, sorry.
I know they talked about like color blindness as well. It was like they were like, I don't see color. People just say like, I don't see color. I can't remember what else she said. That.
I also had to do some self-reflecting because I was like, do I do that? Like, oh, I don't know. Let's see. It's like,
Yeah, how when you say you don't see race, you're saying you don't see racism. So it's also like how that, like you kind of said that too. People try not to participate in racism, but
I like know people who have said that and then like
Yep.
try to justify it like, oh, I just everyone's the same to me, blah blah. But I feel like that's just completely ignoring.
Okay, guys, we actually did not have an overview before. I just went back into the Persian history.
Okay. Well, we'll make one. It's fine.
are you kidding?
We'll make one. We'll make one after this. It's fine. It's not hard.
Yeah, we got it. We're good.
Talk about it so much.
There's this point, the rest of the country is just as America as the South is, and I think that's really important, like remembering that it's America. Like the problem is in America, not South North. You know what I mean?
Yes, yes.
Because that's just creating more division.
Okay.
And like Lincoln, his first priority wasn't to free the slaves, but instead save the Union. And he even said that.
Yeah.
He said something about how like he will do anything to save the Union, and
Yeah.
if that means freeing slaves, then
Yeah,
he'll
he'll
do
do
that.
And he's like, and if it means not doing it,
Then
then I'm
he'll
not
do
going
that
to
too.
either.
yeah, and I thought that was really interesting because again we get this like hero perception. Oh,
Mhm.
Lincoln was so amazing for freeing the slaves. It's like he just was trying to save the Union.
Right.
To this last point where towns and cities are still segregated, I'm gonna say towns and cities in the north are more segregated than they are in the south.
Yeah.
Oh, because they were talking about,
Let's see
who
some
was it was saying like,
the guy on the phone.
people were coming from Chicago because our welfare is,
Mm-hmm.
you get more in welfare here and whatever, I can't remember. I'm trying to find a quote, the rest of the context to that, so that probably just means not a lot.
That's perfect. Okay, key vocabulary, because I think we hit the main points.
Oh.
I have cultural appropriation.
Should we do stereotype? Or is that like too broad for this one? Because I wrote in the beginning stereotype is that wait, what is it even? White South and Southerners are uneducated. And that was from the beginning, like when they were saying like that person moved and, you know, or whatever you said first. I don't know if that's too broad for this though.
Oh my gosh.
I wrote down Freedom Summer because I didn't know what that meant, but I don't know what they even said, so now I'm looking it up.
You can include it. I mean, that's totally
It's
fine.
known as Mississippi's Freedom, also known as Mississippi Freedom Summer, the campaign launched by American civil rights activists in June 1964 to register as many African American voters as possible in the state of Mississippi.
God, I never read my big quote.
Oh, read it, girl.
Do we want it? It's like 6 lines.
You read the 5-line one, we might as well.
Okay.
Do it. Dr. Butler
Okay.
wants to hear.
Lincoln said, if I could, actually, I don't know. if
Oh,
this-
we talked about this.
We
Yeah, I
did?
know what you're gonna say.
Okay,
Say it anyways.
then we're gonna stop. Oh, you want me to state it?
Yeah.
If I could save the Union without freeing any slave, I would do it. And if I could save it by freeing all the slaves, I would do it. What I do about slavery and the colored race, I do it because I believe it helps to save this Union.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry, I
So
put
all
it
you
about
cared
We talked about that.
The
Yeah.
Union.
Snaps.
Must have been a Google version of history, my bad.
Okay, so relationship to social studies.
Teach about race in general rather than saying I don't see race. Hitting again on teaching both sides of history because, like our boy Jefferson, Lincoln was painted as a hero, and he wasn't. He had like, selfish, I guess, ideas too, like saving the Union. He's like, I'll have to do what I have to do,
Yeah.
I guess. All that hat and no thoughts.
There was a quote that I
Okay,
remember
I feel
hearing,
like. Sorry.
but I didn't write it down, and I'm trying to find it in the transcript, and I can't find it, and it's making me really upset. Because I don't want to say it and be wrong. I
What was
want
like the general idea of it?
No, I don't even want to, like,
What were some of the words in it?
I already searched all the key ones. But, like, I can't. It was from, like, a guest. And he said, hold on, I'm going to try to find this. You guys,
Well,
yeah, you can talk about other things, and if I find it, I will bring it up. Because, like, I'm going to say it, but I really hope it's, like, not wrong. It was, like, one of guests said, people in the South now, or some, I don't know if it's people in the South, maybe people in the North, I don't know. People are carrying around Confederate flags that were, like, their ancestors were on the opposite side.
Yep, I know
And he's
exactly what
like-
you're talking about.
I can't find the
It was,
I had to read that twice. I had to like pause it. And
I
read
brought
it
that
again.
up to like my family
Yeah.
afterwards because I was like, that is crazy.
Because it's like your like
Their
your
ants-
granddaddies.
Yes,
did
yes,
something
Were
like-
killed by the people carrying those
That's
flags.
what I
but
was trying to
you are treating that as your heritage, and that they were saying how like heritage now is like a glorified version of history, and that's what we're calling it. But he's like, it's not even your history.
Yeah.
Like you don't even know your own
Yes,
history.
that's what. Yep.
Just what you think it is. Which,
Yeah, what you want it to be.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, I just found
found a quote from the host, John, and he said to Chenjerai, "My great-great-great-grandfather was a captain in the Union Army. I'm very, very, very proud to say that. In fact, you're welcome." And then
Oh yeah, like as a joke, like as a
yeah,
joke, yeah.
yeah, like his tone of voice, like I remember listening to that and being like,
And I
Right.
didn't even know
what
what
are you saying? You're
Sean,
welcome.
Sean.
And then the guy it says laughs, "Thank you, and I will bring some woke biscuits for your family to share." Laughter again.
When I heard
I
that,
love
I read it.
How
I
do
was
you
like, oh,
respond to that? Like what?
you're
I thought he
welcome,
was
by the
gonna
way.
like go Sibley on me, like he was gonna be like this
Yeah.
bad guy. So I'm like,
Go Sibley.
I'm like, stop, I'm over it.
Do it. We have so many more episodes
That's
to
so
do.
funny.
Don't ruin it on episode 6. Literally.
Okay, y'all. Relationship to social studies.
Okay.
How are we gonna teach? What are we gonna do knowing this?
Again, both sides. So it's story was not slavery. Teachers would be aware of these things in repeating lessons. Do research.
I feel like we need more about like
Preconceived attitude.
Could we say more things about the textbook, or is that too drawn out?
to like again. I
Yeah,
don't
like
know.
bring it back up. Being like,
No.
I don't know, because they're
Like how the textbooks. We can just say again. Like we need to be careful
yes,
when using textbooks
which is actually so sad.
because they convey certain messages about people from the South and North.
I'm
Yes.
never using textbooks.
Like
I haven't made it that far yet.
it's like the fact that we have to be careful when reading our textbooks about our history is great. Like
And that could be a reflection for sure. Like it's sad.
okay, yeah, do it right there.
You can. We've got some points. Other reflections.
I feel like my only thing is like, I don't know. So they talked about, like the guests that were on this podcast, how they moved from like the south to the north and having to, like the quote that I had said earlier, like you have to be articulate and intelligent and things like that to justify yourself in the north. And maybe because I was in high school, so like maybe then it was like different. But when I moved to Texas, it didn't, for me, again, like that's just personal, but like didn't feel like that, I guess, like, but I don't know. I'm not really sure where I was going with that, but they definitely do call people Yankees in the South.
Yeah.
Like that's what I was referred to as.
Is that
They're like,
one of
oh, you're
our-
from Ohio, you're a dirty Yankee.
Oh, period. Yeah,
Okay.
that's true. I think I don't know if you have something about this in socials, but like as teachers, just like or even a reflection, avoiding the whole I don't see color is also important. Like if you have like people of different backgrounds and stuff in your class, instead of like I don't know, not seeing color, you know what I'm saying? Like there's just a better way to go about it.
Yep.
That makes sense? I don't know how to word it, but I feel like we even talked about that in our other classes. Like instead of avoiding it, actually talking about it is good. Okay. Okay, reflections, guys. We're gonna finish up. Which we talked about it, so we could probably finish this video.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yep.
Alright.
Thanks for coming to
I
our
hope your
podcast.
dishes are clean.
Sorry about this being super long.
Oh,
Hit it,
yeah.
Gab.